Rain fell in sheets, relentless and cold, slashing across the highway like nature's fury had awakened with no intention of mercy. Ethan's windshield wipers fought to keep up. The rhythmic thump was the only sound in his truck besides the low hum of the engine. The headlights cut through the darkness, catching glints of silver on the wet asphalt. He squinted, leaning forward slightly. That was when he saw her. A girl, barely more than a silhouette at first. She stood at the edge of the road, soaked from head to toe, hair clinging to her face, her arm outstretched with a desperate thumb pointing toward the endless highway. She looked like she had been standing there for hours. Ethan slowed the truck, tires hissing on the wet pavement, and rolled the window down a few inches. "Need a lift?" he called out over the sound of the rain. She stepped closer, hesitated. Her voice was tight and hoarse. I got turned around. I was trying to get to town, but I think I walked the wrong way. I don't have a phone. Could I ride with you, just until the next stop?" Ethan studied her face in the dim light. She was young, maybe mid-20s. Her clothes were damp and thin, her eyes guarded but not wild. He could see she was exhausted, vulnerable, and yet still upright, still trying to move forward. "Hop in," he said, reaching across to unlock the door. She climbed into the passenger seat, wrapping her arms around herself. Water dripped from her sleeves onto the seat. Ethan handed her the blanket he kept behind his seat, and she took it wordlessly, teeth chattering softly. "Thanks," she muttered after a moment, her voice barely above a whisper. They drove in silence for a while, the truck weaving carefully through the rain-slicked curves of the road. After a few minutes, Ethan broke the quiet. "Name's Ethan. I run a small motel up the road, trying to keep it from falling apart." She glanced at him, then turned back to the road ahead. "Lila," she said. "Just Lila." He nodded, not pushing further. "You from around here?" There was a pause. "Not really." "Family nearby?" Another pause, longer this time. "No." Ethan didn't ask again. Some silences did not need to be filled. They rode the rest of the way without much more talk. The rain began to lighten as they reached the outskirts of town, but the streets were empty. Ethan turned onto a gravel road and pulled into a small parking lot beside a two-story building with a flickering neon sign that read Pine Ridge Lodge. The motel was clearly old. Its siding was weathered, but the windows glowed warm, and the front porch light cut through the gloom like a beacon. Ethan parked and killed the engine. "I've got a few rooms open," he said. "Nothing fancy, but dry and with heat. You can stay tonight. No charge." Lila blinked. I don't have any money." "I figured," Ethan said with a half-smile. "But it's cold, and you look like you've had enough of that. I won't ask questions. Just stay until the storm passes." She stared at him for a moment, lips slightly parted, then nodded. "Okay, thank you." Ethan handed her the key to room 7 and led her up the steps. The wooden porch creaked under their weight. He opened the door to a small room, simple but clean. A worn bed, a dresser, a lamp glowing warmly in the corner. "There's soup left from dinner. I'll bring you some." "You don't have to." "I know," he said, "but I'm going to." She stood in the doorway, still holding the blanket tightly around her, watching him like he might disappear if she blinked too long. "Good night, Lila," Ethan said gently. "Good night," she replied. And for the first time since she had gotten in his truck, there was something in her voice besides fear. Lila woke before dawn, the warmth of the borrowed blanket still clinging to her shoulders. She moved quietly, careful not to wake Ethan, who she assumed was still asleep somewhere in one of the back rooms. But he was already up, kneeling near the front step with a hammer in hand, replacing a warped floorboard. "Morning," she said softly. He looked up, surprised. "You're up early." "I didn't sleep much," she admitted. "I was wondering if you needed help with anything." Ethan hesitated. "You don't have to. I meant it when I said the room's free." "I know," she replied, "but I'd feel better if I could do something. I'm not used to not helping." He nodded, jerking his thumb toward a stack of folded linens by the counter. Laundry piled up. "You sure?" She was already moving. "Yes." From that moment on, Lila became a quiet presence around the lodge. She cleaned rooms, swept the halls, fixed squeaky hinges, and even repainted part of the trim around the lobby window, using leftover paint she'd found in the supply closet. She never complained. She never asked for more than what she'd already been given. Ethan watched her with quiet appreciation, unsure what to make of the woman who had arrived like a ghost in the rain and now moved through his world like she belonged there. One afternoon, as they reattached the porch railing, he glanced over at her. "You handy like this everywhere you go?" She smiled, a small, secret sort of smile. "Let's just say I like seeing things put back together." He nodded. He did not press. She had a way of answering just enough without ever giving away more. They began eating together in the tiny kitchen tucked behind the front desk. Ethan cooked simple meals, canned stew, eggs, toast, and she washed dishes, drying each piece with the kind of focus that told him she needed the routine more than he did. Sometimes she told stories, never about herself, never about her past, but always little things. A dream she once had of opening a cafe, a memory of watching deer cross a snowy road, her favorite sound being the soft hum of distant thunder. He listened and noticed how often she looked out the window, like she was expecting something or someone. One night, they sat together on the porch steps, watching the moon rise over the trees. The air was cold enough that their breath came in faint clouds. Ethan passed her a mug of tea, and for a while, neither of them spoke. Then he asked, "You got people looking for you?" Lila stiffened slightly. "Why do you ask?" "It just seems like maybe you left something behind. Or someone." She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "Sometimes leaving is the only way to survive." Ethan looked at her, but said nothing. A long pause stretched between them. Finally, she stood. "Thank you for the tea." She turned quickly. "Lila, I'm going to bed," she said. The screen door creaked as she stepped inside, and closed it behind her with a soft but final thud. Ethan sat alone in the dark for a long time, the mug growing cold in his hands. He did not know who she was, but he was beginning to suspect she was not just a lost traveler. And somewhere deep down, he feared the truth might be something far more complicated than he was ready for. Later that week, while looking for a screwdriver in the supply closet, Ethan knocked over the small canvas bag Lila had tucked away on the top shelf. As it hit the floor, its contents spilled: clothes, a half-used notebook, and a single sleek black card. It gleamed even in the low light, a high-end black titanium bank card with the name Avery Bennett etched in silver. Ethan stared at it, frozen. Lila entered the room just as he picked it up. Her eyes widened, and she quickly stepped forward, snatching the card from his hand. "You okay?" he asked. She held the card tightly, her knuckles white. "I didn't mean for you to see that. That's not exactly the kind of card someone uses at a corner diner." He nodded, not pushing further. "You got people looking for you?" She hesitated. "I should have been more careful." "Hey," Ethan said, stepping closer. "I'm not mad. I just want to understand." She shook her head, backing out of the closet. "Please, just let it go." And with that, she turned and walked quickly down the hall, disappearing into her room. The door clicked shut behind her. Ethan stood in the silence that followed, the truth beginning to press in at the edges of everything he thought he knew about the girl who had shown up in the rain. She had not just been running from bad weather. She was running from something far bigger. And he had this sinking feeling that their quiet life at the Pine Ridge Lodge was about to get far more complicated. The night was unusually still. A storm had passed through earlier, leaving the air dense and quiet, heavy with the scent of rain on warm earth. The Pine Ridge Lodge stood in the hush of midnight, its flickering porch light fighting off the darkness. Inside, Lila was curled up on the couch in the main office, a book resting on her lap, the soft hum of a space heater filling the room. Ethan had gone to bed hours ago after finishing work on one of the plumbing lines in room 3. The power had flickered once earlier, but then steadied. Lila didn't notice the faint smell of smoke at first, not until it began to thicken, curling beneath the door like a warning too soft to be heard. She stood, coughing once, then again, eyes darting toward the back hallway. That was when she saw it, the glow behind the door to the electrical room. Orange and angry. She rushed forward, but the heat pushed her back. She tried the fire extinguisher, but it was old, rusted shut. The flames leapt fast. The dry wood of the lodge fed them greedily. From his room, Ethan woke to the sound of a loud crack, then the unmistakable scent of burning wires. He stumbled from bed, barefoot, and bolted toward the lobby. "Lila," he shouted, coughing into his sleeve. But the smoke was already thick, blinding. He grabbed a wet towel from the sink and wrapped it around his face. The flames were crawling across the ceiling beams now. He moved toward the office. "Lila," he shouted again. A faint voice, coughing, then nothing. He forced the door open and saw her collapsed near the couch, trying to crawl. Her face was pale, her hands shaking. Without thinking, Ethan dove in. The heat seared his arms. The smoke clawed at his lungs, but he reached her. She was barely conscious. He lifted her in his arms and turned back toward the entrance. Each step was harder than the last. The roof groaned. The porch collapsed behind them as he stumbled into the night. He carried her across the gravel lot and fell to his knees in the wet grass near the road, laying her gently down. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused. "You're okay," he said hoarsely. "You're safe." She tried to speak, but nothing came out. Then her eyes closed again. The fire department arrived minutes later. Ethan sat wrapped in a blanket, shivering more from adrenaline than cold. Lila was taken to the hospital. Smoke inhalation. They said she would recover, but he wasn't allowed to ride with her. Protocol. By morning, most of the front section of the Pine Ridge Lodge had burned. The fire marshal said it was faulty wiring. The town would send someone about the permits. Ethan stood alone in the ashes, black soot clinging to his skin, the scent of ruin thick around him. That afternoon, when he returned from giving his statement, he found her room empty. No note, no bag, nothing except for the envelope on the front desk. It was thick, heavy. Inside, a check, 7 figures, and a handwritten note. He stared at the signature at the bottom, Avery Bennett. He read it twice, then again. The note was short, just one paragraph in looping handwriting. "I did not expect kindness from anyone, least of all from someone who had every reason to turn me away. But you helped me when I was no one. Use this to rebuild, not just the walls, but the purpose. Make this a place for people who need a beginning. Thank you for seeing me, for not asking who I used to be." Ethan sat down in the rubble, still clutching the paper, and let the rain begin to fall again around him. The fire had taken the building, but not everything had been lost. Something had been left behind, something greater than any name on a bank card, and he would not let it go to waste. Ethan stood alone in the center of what used to be the lobby, now stripped bare and scaffolded with fresh beams. The sunlight filtered through newly installed windows, casting long shadows across the polished floors. The air no longer smelled of smoke, but of cedar and varnish, new paint, and beginnings. The Pine Ridge Lodge was being rebuilt, better than before, and yet it had never felt emptier. Days turned into weeks. Contractors came and went. Ethan worked alongside them, sometimes from sunrise to well past sundown. He poured himself into the repairs with a quiet determination, his hands always busy, his thoughts never still. When the check from Avery cleared, there had been a moment, just one, when he considered returning it. But the note, folded neatly beside it, had stopped him. Use this to rebuild. So he did. He repaired the damaged rooms, upgraded the wiring, and replaced the roof. The new reception area was brighter, warmer. Lila's touch still lingered in the design. The color palette they had chosen together, the placement of the armchairs by the window, the little coffee bar she once joked about setting up. He built it anyway and placed a jar of sugar packets right where she said they should go. But every evening, when the tools were down and the lights dimmed, the silence pressed in harder than the walls. Ethan had no way to find her. She had left no number, no address, no breadcrumbs to follow. Just a name, Avery Bennett. He had thought of looking her up online a dozen times, but every time he typed the name, his fingers hesitated. It felt like crossing a boundary she had chosen to keep in place. Maybe she did not want to be found. Still, some nights, he drove past the edge of town, the place where he had first seen her standing in the rain, drenched and desperate, asking for a ride with a voice that held both fear and hope. He would slow the truck, stare into the dark roadside, and wonder if maybe, just maybe, she had left a piece of herself there, waiting. Then one morning, everything changed. Ethan was in the small cafe down the street, flipping through a worn newspaper while waiting for his order, when a photo caught his eye. A black and white image, small and sharp, embedded in the center of a page filled with business news. Avery Bennett returns after disappearance. Aries reemerges months after vanishing from public eye. Ethan's hands froze. He leaned closer, heart thudding. The article spoke of a scandal, a high-profile family, whispers of rebellion, and a sudden disappearance that had sparked rumors across tabloids and boardrooms alike. It mentioned a trust fund, a corporate takeover, and a woman who had walked away from all of it without a word, only to reappear suddenly, quietly, and just as mysteriously as she had left. There was a recent photo. It was her, Lila. Her hair was pinned back, her posture perfect. But her eyes, those eyes he had seen lit by the glow of a fire, clouded with smoke, soft with unshed emotion across a breakfast table, they were unmistakable. He read the article twice, 3 times. She had returned to her world. The article did not mention where she was now, only that she had declined all interviews and was adjusting privately. Ethan folded the paper carefully, sat back, and stared out the window. So she had a last name, a legacy, a life he had never imagined. But none of that was what stayed with him. What stayed was the sound of her laughter when paint spilled on his shirt, the way her brow furrowed in concentration while sanding a picture frame, the warmth of her hand on his arm. The night she had first said thank you, not for the room, but for believing her when she could not say who she really was. She had left him a gift far greater than money. She had trusted him with her truth. Now all he could do was honor it. The Pine Ridge Lodge would open again in 2 weeks, and there would be a room just for her, left empty, not forgotten, in case the rain ever brought her back. The package arrived on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. Ethan had just finished repainting the final window frame in room 6, when he saw the delivery truck pull up the gravel driveway. He wiped his hands on a rag and stepped outside, surprised. He was not expecting any supplies this week. Package for M. Ethan Carter, the driver said, handing over a slim box, long and flat, with a New York return address printed in elegant script. Ethan frowned. He took it carefully, thanked the driver, and brought it inside to the newly renovated lobby. The package felt too light for anything mechanical, too polished to be accidental. He slipped the seal gently with his pocket knife. Inside, he found 2 things. The first was a letter, handwritten on thick cream-colored paper. The ink was dark, neat, unmistakably hers. Ethan, I do not know if words are enough, but they are all I have now. I left quietly because I was scared, not of you, but of what being known by my real name might change between us. I thought that disappearing would protect what we had built, but I see now that silence is not always kindness. Thank you for the roof, for the warmth, for letting me be Lila when I could not yet be Avery. Thank you for never asking more than I could give. Enclosed is a small photo I had taken. It was sent to me by someone passing through town. They said the lodge looked even better than it did before. I knew you had finished it. I knew you would. Please keep going. Keep the Pine Ridge Lodge as a place where people feel like they are enough, just as they are. A safe stop in the middle of a storm, a soft light in the dark. With gratitude that words will never fully hold. Avery P. P.S. If you ever find yourself in New York, I owe you a real cup of coffee, one that does not come from a gas station. Ethan set the letter down slowly. His chest felt full, tight, warm in a way he had not expected. For a long time, he simply sat there, hands folded around the paper, reading and rereading her words. Then he reached into the box again and pulled out the second item, a photo. The Pine Ridge Lodge, taken from across the road at just the right angle to show the newly rebuilt porch, the fresh flower beds, the hand-painted sign above the door. The paint still looked wet in the image, the light golden as if caught at just the right hour. He smiled. Later that evening, as dusk fell, he stood in the hallway outside the newly renovated Room 9, the largest suite in the building. Once it had been damaged the worst in the fire. Now it gleamed with soft lighting, warm pine floors, and handmade furniture. He carried with him a carved wooden plaque. He had sanded it himself, stained it with care, and carved each letter with slow precision. Rain room. For the night, I almost lost everything and found something better. He fixed it to the wall, just beside the door. Stepped back, looked at it. It was not just for her. It was for everything they had created in that space, between uncertainty and trust, between strangers in the rain and something more. Ethan placed the photo of the lodge on the counter at the front desk, beside a small vase of wildflowers. And then he whispered, not to anyone in particular. She came through like a storm, but storms pass. And sometimes they leave the world more alive than they found it. The grand reopening of the Pine Ridge Lodge dawned beneath a sky scrubbed clean by overnight rain. The clouds had scattered like old doubts, and the morning air carried the scent of fresh paint, brewed coffee, and 1,000 quiet hopes. Balloons danced at the mailbox. New curtains fluttered in every window. Locals stopped by with flowers, baked goods, and warm congratulations. Ethan moved through it all with a quiet smile, shaking hands, pouring coffee, answering questions about the new rooms. But every so often, he found himself glancing toward the road, searching for something, or someone, that was not yet there. He told himself not to hope. By mid-afternoon, most of the guests had left. The lobby, once bustling, now held a gentle stillness. Ethan stepped outside to breathe. The porch creaked under his boots, the same porch he had rebuilt after the fire, and then he saw her. She stood at the edge of the drive, framed by the soft glow of the late afternoon sun. No umbrella this time, no rain, no need to hide, just her. Hair pinned loosely, a light jacket hugged close to her figure, and a hesitant smile on her lips. He stepped down the steps without a word. "Hey," she said, her voice soft but steady. "Ethan," he said, stopping in front of her. "You came?" She nodded. "I wanted to before, but I wasn't sure if I'd be welcome." "You were always welcome," he said. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Avery took a deep breath. "I left because I was scared, not of you. Of being seen fully, of being loved as me, not the girl in the rain, not the Aries, just me." Ethan's eyes searched hers. "I never wanted anything more than that." "I know that now," she said, "and I'm sorry I made you wonder." He nodded slowly, letting the apology settle like rain into soil. "You didn't owe me anything, but I'm glad you're here." She smiled, but it trembled. "I came to ask if we could start again." "Start again?" Ethan repeated gently. "I don't mean as strangers." "No," she said. "I mean as partners, for this place, for whatever comes next. I want to be part of the lodge. I want to help run it. I want to give people what you gave me, a safe place when they need it most." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached into his back pocket and pulled out a brass key attached to a tag that read Rain Room. "I kept this one for you," he said, holding it out. Her fingers closed around it, slow and reverent. "You're not starting over," Ethan added. "You're continuing." They stood together at the base of the stairs. Then she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper, "And what about us?" He smiled. Then a real smile, the kind that felt earned. "I think," he said, "we're just getting started." That evening, as twilight spilled golden across the hills, Avery helped Ethan serve tea to their first guests. Eli, the local postman, took room 2. A mother and her teenage son, traveling west after a rough year, settled into room 6. Everyone laughed at the cookies being slightly burnt. Avery blamed Ethan. Ethan rolled his eyes. The rain room stayed empty, but not for long. Avery placed her suitcase by the bed before midnight. In the quiet, with the window cracked open to let in the cool breeze, she whispered into the dark, "I'm home." Down the hall, Ethan paused at the door. Then he turned, walked back toward the lobby, and turned off the porch light. He didn't need it tonight. She had already found her way back. By late autumn, the rooms were nearly always full, not with tourists or corporate travelers, but with people passing through on their way to something better. Women escaping bad marriages, veterans rebuilding from nothing, young couples trying to start over. And each of them was greeted not by staff in uniforms, but by Ethan and Avery, often side by side at the front desk, a quiet warmth in their smiles. Ethan fixed what broke. Avery painted what was faded. Between them, the lodge had begun to bloom into more than a place to sleep. It had become a home for those who needed a pause, a breath, a beginning. In the mornings, they made breakfast together, Ethan flipping pancakes, Avery laughing as she tried and failed to keep the coffee from overflowing. They added little touches with every passing month. Books in every room, a community board for job postings, a pantry for those who came empty-handed. Sometimes, a guest left something behind, a thank you note, a sketch of the lodge, a child's hand-drawn heart on the lobby wall. Those things stayed. So did Avery. She never left again, not for the boardrooms, not for the press. She turned down interviews and returned donations with polite letters that always ended the same way. We are not a foundation. We are a family. And this place is enough. The rain room, the largest suite, was the only one not open to guests. It became theirs. At night, Avery sat by the window, curled into Ethan's arm, reading aloud from one of the paperbacks they kept stacked in uneven piles beside the bed. Sometimes she read letters that had been sent to the lodge, words of gratitude from people who had stayed only one night but never forgot what it felt like to be seen. Ethan built her a desk by the sunniest window. She never asked for it. He just saw the way she always moved toward the light, and she filled it with notebooks, maps of the area, postcards sent from former guests, and one framed photo of the motel, the way it looked before the fire, just to remember. The new sign at the entrance said it all: Pine Ridge Lodge. Come as you are. Stay as long as you need. Every Friday, they held potlucks on the porch. Locals brought casseroles. Musicians played under strings of lights. Kids ran barefoot through the grass. No one asked about money. No one asked about names. Everyone had a place. One evening, as leaves turned gold and the air smelled faintly of wood smoke and cinnamon, Avery and Ethan stood side by side before the rain. They had just finished welcoming a woman and her daughter fleeing from a violent home, guiding them gently to room 5, where fresh towels and soft lighting waited. Now the lodge was quiet again. Lamps glowed behind windows. The stars began to appear, slow and certain above the roof. Ethan reached out and took Avery's hand. She looked up at him, her eyes steady and full. "We built something," she whispered. He nodded. "Not just walls." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "This is more than I ever imagined." He looked toward the road, the same stretch where he had first seen her, a girl in the rain with no name and a story she was not ready to tell. And then he looked back at the lodge, at the lives that had passed through its doors, at the woman beside him. "You changed everything," he said. She smiled. "You gave me a place to start." They stood in silence for a while, not needing to fill it with words. And as the breeze rustled the leaves, as the porch light flickered softly overhead, they both knew the truth. This was not a love story about grand gestures or perfect beginnings. This was a story about second chances, about what happens when kindness meets courage, and about the quiet miracle of finding home, not in a place, but in a person willing to stay. If this story moved you, the quiet courage, the unexpected love, and the power of choosing someone over and over, then you're exactly where you need to be. At Soul-Stirring Stories, we believe in the kind of tales that stay with you long after the screen fades to black. Stories of healing, hope, and the kind of love that does not ask to be seen but is felt in every quiet gesture. If you felt something tonight, do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more heartfelt journeys just like this one. And remember, sometimes all it takes is a rainy night, a kind stranger, and a place to belong. We will see you in the next story.